Jason pushed his cart down the shiny school hallway, the squeak of the wheels a familiar song. At 35, with kind eyes and a smile that rarely reached them, he was the quiet guardian of Northwood Elementary. Most days he wore blue overalls and a quiet hum, a tune he'd learned from his little girl, Lily. He was a single dad, and every scrub of the floor, every wiped-down desk was for her. He passed by Mrs. Gable's classroom, where a lively art project was happening. She glanced up, offered a quick, polite nod, and went back to helping a child with glitter glue. Later, in the teacher's lounge, he heard snippets of conversation as he emptied the overflowing trash can. "Oh, the spring concert plans are coming along," one teacher chirped. Another sighed, "I wish we had more funds for new instruments." No one really looked at Jason, the man with sawdust memories clinging to his heart even now. They saw the custodian, the one who made sure the school was clean, safe, and ready for learning. They saw the uniform, not the man inside it. He understood mostly. His job was to clean. Their job was to teach. The two worlds often felt very far apart. Yet sometimes, when a child dropped a drawing or a forgotten mitten, and Jason returned it with a gentle word, he saw a spark of connection. He wasn't just the cleaner. He was part of the school's rhythm, even if he played a silent drum. Lily, his spirited 8-year-old, attended Northwood too. She was the one bright note in his life, the reason he woke up each morning and faced the day, even when it felt heavy. He often wondered if her teachers saw him differently because he was her dad. He never really knew. He just kept his head down, did his work, and dreamed of a time when the world might see a little more of the Jason underneath the blue overalls. One Tuesday afternoon, the sky turned a bruised purple. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, shaking the old school building. Rain lashed against the windows, not just drops, but sheets of water. Jason, finishing up in the cafeteria, heard the creak and groan of the old oak tree outside the music room. He felt a bad feeling in his stomach. He knew that tree was close to the building. The next morning, the school looked like a giant had played a rough game with it. Branches lay everywhere, leaves plastered to the walls, but the worst sight was the music room. A huge part of the oak tree had crashed right through the roof. Rain had poured in for hours, instruments lay broken and wet. A piano sat with its keys smashed, looking like a giant's broken teeth. The drums were torn and violins were split in half. It was a sad, watery mess. When the children arrived, their happy chatter turned to quiet gasps. Lily ran to Jason, her eyes wide with worry. "Dad, the music room," she whispered. Teachers gathered, their faces grim. "What are we going to do, Mrs. Gable asked, her voice tight. "The spring concert is only 2 months away." The children were truly heartbroken. Music was a big part of their school life. They loved tapping on the drums, plucking the guitar strings, and singing along to the piano. Now all those joyful sounds were gone. A little boy named Sam started to cry, looking at his favorite broken drum. Other children joined him, tears rolling down their cheeks. The silence in the hallway felt heavier than usual, filled with the sadness of lost music. Jason watched them, his heart aching. He saw not just broken instruments, but broken spirits. He saw Lily's sad face, and a memory of a different kind of music, a different kind of making, stirred inside him. The image of the crying children and the ruined music room stayed with Jason long after he'd helped clean up the immediate mess. As he pushed his broom across the cafeteria floor that evening, his mind wasn't on spilled milk or forgotten crumbs. It was on splintered wood and snapped strings. He thought about Sam's tear-stained face, about Lily's quiet sadness, and how much joy music brought to them all. Then a forgotten feeling stirred deep inside him. It was a warmth, a memory of sawdust on his hands and the sweet smell of freshly cut timber. Before he became a custodian, before Lily's mom got sick, Jason had been a carpenter. Not just any carpenter, but one who loved to work with his hands, shaping wood into beautiful things. He had built furniture, carved delicate designs, and even fixed old musical instruments for a small shop downtown. He had a special touch, a way of seeing how broken pieces could fit back together, stronger and more beautiful than before. He thought of the warped violin, the cracked guitar, the drum that looked beyond repair. Most people would see trash. But Jason saw a puzzle, a challenge. He saw the potential for music to play again. It had been years since he'd picked up his old tools, years since he'd felt the satisfying weight of a hammer in his hand or the smooth slide of sandpaper over wood. The memories were mixed with sadness, tied to a time he'd rather forget. Yet, looking at the children's faces, a different feeling bloomed. He knew he couldn't rebuild the whole room by himself, but he could do something. He could fix the instruments. It wouldn't be easy, and it definitely wasn't part of his job description. But seeing the children so sad, knowing he had a skill that could bring back their smiles, Jason knew what he had to do. He would help quietly with his own two hands. He decided then and there to dust off his old tools and bring back the music. That very evening, after Lily was tucked into bed, Jason drove to his dusty old shed behind his house. He pushed aside forgotten boxes and cobweb-laced tarps until he found it, his workbench, still covered in the faint scent of wood and memories. His toolbox, heavy and familiar in his hands, was pulled from a shelf. Inside, chisels, tiny saws, specialized glues, and fine sandpaper lay waiting, just as he'd left them years ago. The next day, after his regular duties were done and the last teacher had left, Jason quietly started his new, secret job. He found a small, unused storage closet near the ruined music room. It was tight, but it had a light and an outlet. He carefully carried the most damaged instruments there. A violin with a deep crack, a guitar with a snapped neck, and several drums with broken skins. He worked slowly, carefully. First, he studied each piece, feeling the wood, understanding its damage. His hands, though used to mops and brooms, remembered the delicate touch needed for intricate repairs. He cleaned, glued, clamped, and sanded. The air in the little closet soon filled with the sweet, familiar smell of wood glue and fine dust. It was a smell he hadn't known he missed, a smell that brought a quiet peace to his heart. Days turned into nights. Jason would finish his custodian work, then slip into his hidden workshop. He skipped his usual TV shows and late-night snacks. He poured all his extra time and careful attention into the instruments. He wasn't thinking about praise or thanks. He was thinking about the children's sad faces, about the missing music, and about the quiet joy of making something whole again. Each small fix, each mended crack, was a step towards bringing back the forgotten sounds of Northwood Elementary. One afternoon, as Jason was carefully sanding down a violin bridge, a small shadow appeared in the doorway of his makeshift workshop. It was Lily, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Dad." "What are you doing in here?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I'm fixing things, sweet pea, trying to bring some music back." Lily's face lit up. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice full of hope. Jason thought for a moment. It was a risk, letting children into his secret project. But he saw the eagerness in her eyes and remembered his own joy in making. "You can," he said, "but you have to be very careful and very patient." Soon, Lily brought a few friends, like Sam, the boy whose drum was broken. Jason set up a small table with safe tasks. Sorting tiny screws, gently wiping dust from instrument cases, or carefully sanding the edges of small wooden pieces under his watchful eye. "See this crack," he'd point out, showing them a tiny imperfection on a cello. "It needs a steady hand and a lot of patience to make it smooth again." He didn't just tell them, he showed them. He explained how each little part was important, how glue needed time to dry, how sanding too hard could ruin the wood. The children listened, their young faces serious. They learned that fixing things wasn't always fast, but it was rewarding. When Sam finally held a polished, newly skinned drum, his eyes shone with a pride that made Jason's heart swell. "I helped make it whole," Sam exclaimed, tapping it softly. Lily, too, beamed when she helped glue a tiny piece back onto a flute. Jason made sure they understood that the true magic was in their careful work and patience, not just in the finished instrument. He was teaching them more than just carpentry. He was teaching them the value of their own hands and the joy of creation. One evening, after the last of the children had left, Lily stayed behind, carefully polishing a tiny wooden flute. Dad, she asked, looking up at him, her brow wrinkled in thought, you're so good at fixing things. Why did you stop being a carpenter? Jason paused, his sanding block still. The air in the small closet felt thick with unspoken things. He looked at his daughter, her innocent eyes full of questions, and knew it was time. It was after your mom passed away, sweet pea, he began, his voice softer than usual. Your mom loved watching me work. She'd bring me coffee, hum along to the radio in the workshop, and tell me how beautiful everything I made was. He looked at the dusty tools, each one a memory. When she was gone, the workshop felt too quiet, too empty. Every piece of wood, every swirl of sawdust reminded me of her. It was too hard to be there without her. He explained how the joy had left his craft, how the bright colors of his work turned gray after losing his wife. It felt like a part of me went with her, Lily, the part that loved to create, to build. He saw understanding dawn in Lily's eyes. She put down the flute and hugged him tight. But you're building again, Dad, she whispered into his overalls. You're making music again. Jason held her close, a small tear escaping his eye. Her words, so simple and true, were a balm to his old wounds. He realized that while the pain of losing her mom was still there, the joy of creating, especially for others, was slowly, quietly returning. He hadn't just sacrificed his craft, he had buried a part of himself. Now, with Lily's help and the children's hope, that buried part was beginning to breathe again. The quiet hum of saws and the gentle tap of tiny hammers had been Jason's secret symphony for weeks. The children, excited by their growing collection of fixed instruments, started talking. A whisper here, a proud shout there about Mr. Jason and the magic fixing room. Soon, the whispers reached the ears of the school principal, Mr. Harrison, and then inevitably the school board. One chilly morning, Jason was called into Mr. Harrison's office. 3 stern-faced people from the school board sat around the table, their expressions tight. Mr. Peterson, began Ms. Albright, the head of the board, her voice sharp. We understand you've been engaging in unauthorized activities after hours. Jason's heart sank. He knew this might happen. I've been repairing the instruments, ma'am, he said, looking at her directly. For the children, they were so sad. Another board member, Mr. Davies, frowned. While we appreciate initiative, Mr. Peterson, this is a serious breach of protocol. You're a custodian, not a carpenter. You've overstepped your job description. There are safety concerns, liability issues, and we have a budget for these things. He didn't seem to care about the children's sadness. He cared about rules and money. But the budget would take months to approve, Jason tried to explain. The children wanted their music back now. Ms. Albright held up a hand. Your intentions may have been good, but you acted without permission. This puts the school in a difficult position. We cannot have staff performing duties outside their contracted roles, especially involving children and potentially dangerous tools. She looked at him with an icy stare. We're going to have to ask you to stop immediately, and we'll need to discuss disciplinary action. Jason felt a cold dread spread through him. All his hard work, all the children's joy, was being dismissed, just like him. The news of Jason's scolding from the school board spread like wildfire. It started with the children, who told their parents how Mr. Jason was trying to fix their music and how the grown-ups were stopping him. Parents talked to other parents at the grocery store, at school drop-off, and on community social media pages. Soon, the whole town of Northwood buzzed with talk about the kind custodian and the broken music room. Many parents remembered their own children's sadness after the storm. They had seen the joy in their kids' eyes when they talked about helping Mr. Jason. They knew how long it would take for the school board to approve money for new instruments. Jason had simply acted from his heart. A special meeting was called by the school board to officially decide Jason's fate. But when the evening arrived, the school auditorium, usually quiet and empty, was packed. Parents, teachers, including a quiet but determined Mrs. Gable, and even some town elders filled every seat. They didn't come to listen, they came to speak. Ms. Albright, looking surprised by the crowd, tried to start the meeting, but a parent stood up. Excuse me, Ms. Albright, she said loudly, but we're here about Jason Peterson. He shouldn't be punished for doing something good. Another parent quickly followed. He brought joy back to our children. That's worth more than any rule. Lily, sitting next to Jason, squeezed his hand tightly. He looked around at all the faces, so many of them familiar, so many showing kindness and support. He had always felt like an outsider, just the custodian. But tonight, these people, this community, were standing up for him. It was a powerful, unexpected wave of support, making his heart swell with a feeling he hadn't known in a long time. Belonging, the school board members, used to quiet meetings, looked uncomfortable, clearly unprepared for the outpouring of community love for their custodian. Among the parents and community members at the school board meeting, a young teacher named Sarah stood near the back, listening intently. She was the music teacher, and the destruction of her classroom had been a heavy blow. At 32, with bright, curious eyes and a warm smile, she had watched Jason from a distance for weeks. She'd noticed the children's excited whispers, seen the faint scent of wood glue on Lily's clothes, and wondered. Now, hearing the community speak up for him, she understood. Sarah had initially felt helpless after the storm. The school board had promised new instruments, but eventually felt like forever to children who missed their music. She had admired Jason's quiet dedication, the way he always had a kind word for the students, and how meticulously he kept the school. But she hadn't known about his secret project or the depth of his heart. After the meeting, which ended with the board agreeing to review Jason's actions more carefully thanks to the community's outcry, Sarah approached him. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice soft but clear. Jason turned, surprised. "It's Jason, please." "Jason," she repeated, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm Sarah. I just wanted to say thank you. What you did for the children, for our music room, it's truly amazing." Her eyes, kind and thoughtful, looked past his uniform right into his. She saw the humility in his stance, the quiet devotion that had driven him to work countless hours for no pay, only for the children's happiness. Jason, not used to such direct praise from a teacher, felt a blush creep up his neck. "I just wanted to help," he mumbled. "You did more than help," Sarah said, her smile widening. "You showed them what it means to care, to create, to rebuild, and you showed me too." There was a warmth in her gaze that made Jason feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long while. He found himself liking the way her smile brightened her whole face and the honest admiration in her eyes. It was a new, unexpected melody in his life. The community's support had won the day. The school board, swayed by the heartfelt words of parents and the quiet strength of Jason's actions, agreed to let him finish the repairs. They even started a fund to properly rebuild the music room itself, inspired by his dedication. With Sarah's help, Jason and the children worked tirelessly, their little workshop buzzing with renewed purpose. Finally, the day of the spring concert arrived. It wasn't in the old, ruined music room, but in the brightly lit school auditorium. The stage was set, and the children, beaming, gathered with their instruments. Many of the instruments were the ones Jason and the kids had fixed, polished, and brought back to life. Jason sat in the front row, Lily's hand in his, with Sarah smiling beside them. He felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of deep contentment. He wasn't just the custodian anymore. He was a part of this vibrant, musical family. Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride, not just for the children, but for him. Their quiet talks over coffee, sharing ideas for the music program, had grown into something special, a gentle harmony. Then it was Lily's turn. She walked onto the stage, a little nervous but standing tall. In her hands was an old, beautiful acoustic guitar, Jason's asterisk guitar, the one he had owned for years, now lovingly restored. He had fixed its cracked body, polished its worn fretboard, and strung it with care just for her. Lily took a deep breath, looked out at the audience, and began to play. A sweet, clear melody filled the hall, a song about hope and new beginnings. Her fingers danced over the strings, pulling forth a sound that was both old and new. Jason watched, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. He saw not just Lily, but also a glimpse of his wife, her love for music living on through their daughter. The entire audience clapped and cheered, their hearts full. Lily had made the restored guitar sing, and in doing so, she had helped her dad's heart sing again too. The music room, though still under repair, was already alive, thanks to Jason's hands and a community's heart.